It's 8 p.m. in East Africa, 1 a.m. in China. You're watching Africa Live. Thank you for joining us. I am Penina Karibe with plenty coming up, including these stories. Zimbabwe's government has sued the EU of an estimated $42 billion for loss from sanctions on President Mugabe. And 2007 Rugby World Cup winner Schalkberger speaks to CCTV about returning to the pitch after life-threatening illness. Oh, it's the eve of Madagascar's crunch elections, and final preparations are underway to ensure a smooth vote that many hope will see a return to democratic rule after 4 years of political turmoil. The crisis, which began after a 2009 coup, has taken a heavy toll on the country and the Malagasy people. It's now one of the poorest countries in the world, with 92% of the population living on less than $2 a day. But the frontrunners in the presidential poll are all promising to change the island's fortune and get the economy back on track. Well, for more on that, I'm now joined by Clementine Logan, live from Antananarivo. Clem, just hours now until people go to the polls. What's the general mood among the Malagasy people?
Well, Penina, the ballots have all reached the 20,000 polling stations across the country, just hours to go until the vote, as you said. And the mood's one of optimism in the sense that many people feel an election is the only way out of this protracted crisis that Madagascar's found itself in since 2009. So there are quite a lot of expectations ahead, and the dozen or so front runners are all running on similar campaign pledges. That's to create much needed jobs, deliver on basic services that are critical to growth, and get the economy that's been lagging behind in the region back on track. Well, these promises have been met by enthusiasm from some, but skepticism from others. And that's because it's unlikely that one single candidate will get that 50% needed to be declared an outright winner, making a second round in December highly likely. And all of those tipped to make it to the second round are high-ranking officials who've been in the political system for some time now. Analysts say that we'll probably see that fought out by the candidate backed by ousted President Mark Ravalomanana, that's Dr. Jean-Louis Robinson, or a couple that seem to have the backing of transitional leader Andry Rajoelina. So some Malagasy people are worried that these elections aren't going to deliver the change they say they need, but rather more of the same. And earlier on we spoke to a few people and asked them whether they thought these elections could improve their lives, and here's what they had to say.
The people are looking for a president who is elected by the people and for transparent elections, so all the population can accept it.
We are expecting many changes in life and in general, but especially improvement in security and economy. That's in my view.
According to me, I expect that this election can bring a better life and security so that we can end this crisis.
So, Clem, as we just heard, conditions in Madagascar are pretty bad for a lot of people. What's at stake for the island with this election?
Well, Penina, a huge amount is at stake here. Since the crisis began nearly 5 years ago, foreign aid, which accounted for some 40% of the national budget, has all but dried up. And Madagascar really became increasingly isolated. So some people feel that a credible election result, and many of the officials we've spoken to today seem confident that that can be delivered, would see Madagascar welcomed back into the international community, the African Union also asking it to rally behind these elections, and importantly see that donor funding start trickling back in, which is really crucial if Madagascar is going to get back on its feet. Penina.
All right, Clem, let's leave it there for now. Thanks very much for those insights. Clementine Logan live there from Antananarivo. Now, the biggest challenge for Madagascar's next government is getting the island back on its feet. Madagascar is rich in natural resources, but it's also one of the poorest places on the planet. CCTV's Sunlan has more.
26-year-old single mother Bertine Javariso has been out of formal work for 4 years. She now sells juice on a busy street in Antananarivo. The money she makes is barely enough to support her and her 6-year-old daughter. Bertine used to work in a textile factory sewing zippers and collars for garments that were exported. But after the 2009 political crisis, the U.S. suspended its preferential trade agreement with Madagascar, and the factory was one of the many here that was forced to close.
It was good when I worked in the factory. I got paid regularly, but now the income from the juice is not very stable. Sometimes it's very difficult, especially during the cold season.
On a good day, she can make $5 a day. On a bad day, nothing at all.
Bertine's story is not unusual. The political crisis over the past 4 years has had a severe influence on the lives of ordinary people here in Madagascar. They are desperate for a change.
The coup that toppled Marc Ravalomanana in 2009 also triggered sanctions and a big cut in development aid from the likes of the European Union. Potential international investors found safer places for their money, and there was also a sharp drop in tourist numbers. The United Nations says 9 out of 10 people here live on less than $2 a day, the international poverty line. And in the past 4 years, life for many here has grown even tougher.
During the crisis, a drop in basically more than 350,000 people have lost their jobs, and this means families that are affected by this. It's not just individuals, it's families that are affected by this. So there is a compounding factor and an indirect factor that affects this number.
On top of that, recent natural disasters, cyclones, flooding, even a locust invasion have hit hard. Production of rice, the staple diet, has been cut by 1/5. More than half the population could face food shortages in the months to come.
I hope Madagascar will be more secure. I hope I can have a real job and life can be easier. I hope there will be no more crisis.
Madagascar has plenty going for it: agriculture, tourism, mining, and newly discovered oil. With an election, there's also a promise sanctions will be lifted. But the next government must find a way to ensure ordinary people will benefit. Sun Lan, CCTV, Antananarivo, Madagascar.
You're watching Africa Live. Let's take our first break coming up. Support for AMISOM. UN Secretary General appeals for support to bolster AU troops in Somalia. And royalty making a difference. We take lessons in Bauchi State in our ongoing series on the road trip to northern Nigeria.
The abduction of Libya's Prime Minister Ali Zaidan laid bare a deadly struggle within that country's fragile government. This week, Talk Africa probes Libya's emerging militia problem and explains why Africa cannot afford to look the other way.
French, UN and Malian forces have launched a joint operation against Islamists across northern Mali just a day after a suicide attack killed 2 Chadian peacekeepers in the desert zone. French military officials said the major operation is aimed at preventing a resurgence of Islamist rebels in Mali. France dispatched thousands of troops to Mali in January to halt an advance south by Islamists linked to Al-Qaeda who occupied northern Mali. It still has 3,200 soldiers in the country, but Paris plans to draw the force down to 1,000 by February. However, this is partly dependent on the rollout of a UN peacekeeping mission, which is so far only at half its mandated strength of 12,600 men. Now, two new reports from the United Nations this week about Somalia, one showing a sharp fall in piracy off the Horn of Africa, but another expressing concern about the security situation on shore. Our UN correspondent Stephen Fee has all the details from New York.
Well, indeed, Secretary General Ban Ki-moon is shedding some new light on his concerns about Somalia. In a letter he composed to members of the UN Security Council, he says he's concerned about the security situation on the ground in Somalia. Somalia, of course, has been involved in a pitched battle with al-Shabaab militants, and Secretary Ban says that those very militants have shifted tactics away from traditional warfare and over to more guerrilla-style attacks. And we saw that just over this last weekend. A suicide bomb at a cafe near the Ethiopian border claimed 16 lives. It's a cafe frequented by soldiers that are fighting those very militants. Now, the UN is involved in supporting an African Union-led peacekeeping force called AMISOM. Ban says that that force is now in a defensive and static posture. He also highlighted the Westgate Mall attack in Nairobi, saying that was an example of how al-Shabaab can plan attacks in Somalia that, of course, can have a devastating reach outside of Somalia's borders. The UN is supporting an AMISOM recommendation now to increase the troop strength to above 20,000 personnel, at least over the next 2 years. Secretary General Ban also says member states need to step up and help donate things like helicopters and other types of assets that the Security Council is committed to, but that so far member states have not offered up. Now, in a separate report, the Secretary General did point to some progress on piracy. He says that pirate attacks off of the coast of Somalia are at a 7-year low. The number of attacks well down. He says that's because of increased patrols and also increased defensive posture by ships plying the waters off of the Horn of Africa. Still, the UN does note that 17 ships were attacked in the first 9 months of 2013 and that piracy continues to be lucrative. In 2012, pirates netted some $40 million in ransoms.
All right, so that's CCTV Stephen Fee reporting for us from New York. So let's discuss that situation further. That's Ropin Mohammed Hirmoge joining us live from Somalia's capital, Mogadishu. Mohammed, thanks for joining us. So the UN Secretary General is concerned that AMISOM is now a largely defensive and static force. Why is this the case?
Well, the answer to that very much lies in the address by Ban Ki-moon to the Security Council and advising of the Security Council on the benchmarks to set for the possible consolidation of the African Union and the United Nations mission in Somalia. And Ban Ki-moon has said AMISOM currently is quite static and defensive, and that is a fact because even as we know that 50% of the territory in Somalia is still under the control of al-Shabaab, AMISOM has largely become a static force, as has been seen over here. There has not been new territory recovered since the beginning of this year, almost, apart from a few routes and towns that has been recovered. And Ban Ki-moon says it is not realistic for AMISOM to achieve the desired goals without air assets, and we understand that is a big issue for AMISOM. AMISOM force doesn't have any force multipliers. They don't have air assets, and AMISOM are expected to pacify and liberate the entire country from the al-Shabaab. Besides, as Ban Ki-moon said, it is quite necessary to train and capacitate the Somali National Army so that they give hand in taking the new territory, pacifying the new territory as AMISOM moves forward and advances.
Well, but Mohammed, some then would argue that AMISOM has been credited with helping liberate and restore a sense of stability in various regions and cities. So would you paint us a picture of the balance of power between the liberated areas and those still under the al-Shabaab, and how much further then does AMISOM need to go?
Well, as a matter of fact, AMISOM has recovered quite a useful territory from al-Shabaab over the last 6 years. We're speaking about major towns, routes and cities. We're speaking about Mogadishu, Kismayo, Beledweyne, Baidoa, and a few other routes and towns. But as Ban Ki-moon has said in his letter to the Security Council, over the last few months, AMISOM has become quite static. And given the fact that al-Shabaab has changed tact from a conventional war style to an asymmetrical war style, where they've become a largely guerrilla force. However, we understand 50% of the land is still under the control of al-Shabaab. Therefore, speaking about juxtaposing maybe how much is recovered and how much is not recovered, we understand what has been done is by far less than the work left here.
All right, Mohamed Hirmoge reporting for us there from Mogadishu. Thank you for joining us. Now, calls are growing for Mozambique's government to quickly negotiate with former rebels Renamo. The group earlier this week pulled out of a long-standing peace deal, and there's been an escalation of violence. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has urged both sides to halt the violence and talk. Mozambique suffered one of Africa's bloodiest civil wars before the peace deal struck in 1992. The country's been recovering since then, but some fear it could now be destabilized. CCTV's Guy Henderson has more.
Now, Renamo is thought to have around 1,000 or so fighters left inside Mozambique. That's not thought to be enough for it to be willing or able to wage any kind of direct confrontation against the state. What is perhaps more likely is that it could escalate a sabotage campaign that's already underway. That might involve, for example, targeting government and state infrastructure. It might also mean targeting supply routes for what are now huge reserves of natural gas and coal that's being exploited relatively recently in Mozambique. Natural resources that are on the way potentially to making Mozambique a very rich country and are the main contributing factor towards it posting general gross domestic product growth of more than 7% a year. Now that is, of course, riches and potential riches that this rebel group is keen to gain at least a small slice of. We are beginning to see the early signs of a possible regional response to this, to these latest developments. Zimbabwe has suggested that the Southern African Development Community may be prepared to send in a force of some sort, but only if the security situation was to deteriorate. That hasn't happened yet, and it's not thought likely by many analysts here, certainly, that would be necessary or likely at any point in the imminent future. There would also be big questions around where that personnel would come from. South Africa is the dominant military force in the region, but its forces are already heavily committed to a United Nations peacekeeping force in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And there is, of course, also renewed pressure for it to contribute a force or personnel of some sort to the Central African Republic as well. It's not really thought that it would be able to stretch much further militarily. So regionally, these latest developments are being treated with concern, and certainly regional leaders are aware of them. But at this early stage, it's not being seen as a crisis. Guy Henderson, CCTV at the Presidency's office in South Africa.
EU leaders are meeting in Brussels, where on top of boosting employment and dealing with a US internet spying scandal, they're also attempting to tackle a complex immigration crisis thrust into the spotlight after hundreds of migrants drowned earlier this month trying to reach Europe. I spoke earlier with CCTV's Jack Button in Brussels.
The European Leaders Summit was supposed to be about cleaning up the bloc's financial mess, but has been overshadowed by news German Chancellor Angela Merkel's phone may have been tapped by the US, as well as the more pressing issue of immigration along Europe's Mediterranean coast. The Italian Prime Minister Enrico Letta arrived in Brussels promising to put immigration at the top of the agenda and threatening to cut Italian funds to the EU if ignored. Malta and Spain have also joined Italy in demanding the EU share more of the financial burden of processing and settling asylum seekers, as well as providing more resources for patrolling the Mediterranean, in which more than 2,000 migrants have died over the past 3 years. Rights groups warn the EU must quickly define a common policy on dealing with refugees from conflicts such as Syria, as well as migrants seeking a better life. Despite the pressure, diplomats say they expect little more than an agreement to examine limited short-term remedies at this meeting. Anti-immigration parties are on the rise across Europe, and politicians are beginning to tread very cautiously with decisions that may cost them votes. Jack Barton, CCTV, Brussels.
As European Union leaders meet in Brussels, there is pressure for the 28-member bloc to revamp its immigration policies. The wreck of a migrant ship that killed more than 350 people off the coast of Italy this month got their attention. While some far-right anti-immigration movements are pushing for tighter controls, there are pockets of tolerance across Europe. CCTV's Kate Parkinson takes us to a small village in Italy where immigrants are embraced.
Perched on top of a hill in the south of Italy lies the village of Riace, where refugees and migrants are welcomed with open arms. It's all part of a plan by the village mayor to do something real to help those who risk their lives getting to Europe on rickety boats. Mayor Domenico Lucano receives state funding for his resettlement programme, but he says it's cheaper than keeping people in a detention centre. And the picturesque village is certainly a nicer place to live for those fleeing poverty, conflict or persecution. Lucano's programme helps people find jobs, somewhere to live, and they're given food tokens to spend in local shops. New arrivals are also taught Italian, so they can integrate into the community and become part of local life.
For a long time, our mayor has had a vision for the future. In the past, this place was deserted. The young people had left, some to study, others to work. He had a good idea to welcome the immigrants here. I call them our brothers. He opened up the empty houses and welcomed the people that really needed them.
But in these economic hard times, jobs are scarce, and many choose to leave Riace when their asylum papers come through. Even those who do stay know they might not be here forever.
If I know that I cannot support myself, then I will go back to Africa. I need to give it time. All my friends have left, and I have settled here in this little village where there is no work.
Life here is far from perfect, but as the European Union wakes up to the number of refugees and migrants pouring into Europe, maybe the resettlement programme here could be used as a model in other places. Kate Parkinson, CCTV, Riace in southern Italy.
Let's take another break here on Africa Live coming up. Royalty making a difference. We take lessons in Bauchi State in our ongoing series on the road trip to northern Nigeria. To Nigeria now, and the latest report from our team on the road to the country's troubled north, this time from the city of Bauchi. In the local Hausa language, its name means the land of freedom and tourism. For many who live in Bauchi, though, the life there is far more of a struggle. CCTV's Robert Nagila has more.
More than 50 different ethnic groups live in and around this city, and Bauchi can boast more than its fair share of royalty. Traditional culture is a big part of daily life. Local chiefs are convinced they can hold communities together in these troubled times.
Anybody that comes from Edo don't have anything to do with religious conflict, because Edo, that is where you have the Muslims. Edo, you have the Christians. In Edo, you have the free thinkers. Edo, you still have the idol worshippers, those called traditionists.
The reason why there is problem in some parts of this country is that people to derail from their culture. our cultural heritage is very, very important.
Our youth are exposed to our culture at a very early stage, so they don't misbehave.
Someone is misbehaving though. There have been frequent flare-ups. Bauchi also has suffered sectarian violence and attacks blamed on Islamist insurgents, Boko Haram. With a large percentage of the population made up of the youth and a high unemployment rate, Bauchi is an ideal recruitment ground for groups like Boko Haram. So, alongside the emphasis on traditional values, Bauchi is also seeking to keep its young people busy. The state government is trying to reach out by funding sustainable development.
Every person that is engaged there will go for 6-month training. The state government will give monthly allowance for the participant so that you don't have anything to complain. After completion of the 6-month program, state government against tea purchase and hand over to the participant graduate equipment necessary to establish such trade with working capital to support.
There are no figures available on the program's success rate. Officials believe it will pay off. They say Bauchi has plenty of potential. Already, they're building a big new international airport. But so far, this city has yet to live up to its name. Robert Magelo, CCTV, Bauchi, Nigeria.
Kenyan actress Lupita Nyong'o bagged her first award at the 17th Hollywood Film Awards held at the Beverly Hilton in Los Angeles, California. Nyong'o was honored with the new Hollywood Award for her breakout role in Steve McQueen's 12 Years a Slave, which debuted in select theaters over the weekend. Susan Mwangeli reports.
The Kenyan actress Lupita Nyong'o joined Hollywood A-listers like Harrison Ford, Matthew McConaughey and Sandra Bullock on the red carpet in Beverly Hills for the 17th Annual Hollywood Film Awards. The event, which is seen as the official kickoff to Hollywood's awards season, is held to honor excellence in the art of filmmaking as well as creative talent within the entertainment community. Receiving the new Hollywood Award, the 30-year-old Kenyan said she was overwhelmed to be working with some of the industry's top talent.
Excuse me. As you can tell, I'm a bit overwhelmed by all this, but I also feel extremely blessed. It's been an incredible journey so far already, and standing here in front of all of you, people that I admire, I am so honored.
Lupita landed her role as Patsy in 12 Years a Slave while still enrolled at the Yale School of Drama. Harrison Ford, whose long career includes iconic roles in the Star Wars and Indiana Jones franchise, was also feted in the awards. He was recognized for his achievements with this year's Hollywood Career Achievement Award.
I'm still here, man. I'm still working. I'm not, I couldn't be happier. I've been lucky enough to work with incredibly talented people. Some of the success that we've enjoyed together has allowed me to options and choices in my career, which, are, been a dream.
Other stars feted at the 17th Annual Hollywood Film Awards were Academy Award winner Sandra Bullock, who is generating another Oscar buzz for her role in Gravity, Jake Gyllenhaal for the Hollywood Supporting Actor Award, Julia Roberts for the Hollywood Supporting Actress Award, among others. Susan Mwangeli, CCTV.
Now, every year, Togo holds its annual beer festival. The festival is organized to celebrate and promote various local and international brews, as well as attract tourists from the wider West African region. This year is not any different, as the small West African state is hosting the 7th edition of the festival in its capital, Lome. More than 150,000 visitors have descended on the town for the event, which runs until Saturday. So far, 300,000 liters of beer have been sold. Togo inherited the festival from former colonial power Germany, where beer is a major part of everyday life.
This year this is not so festive compared to last year, but we are still enjoying the event. It's very great to share this moment in family. I will come back tomorrow to bring my nieces and nephews.
I am so happy to be back this year and sell beer to Togolese and beer lovers coming from all over the world. This is a very interesting time in Togo, and we always expect the Togo Beer Festival to give us the opportunity to be together.
There's a lovely atmosphere, great moments. We are expecting to come again tomorrow and drink more beer, but all of us should think about driving safe back home. This is important for us. Party, but no risk.
Also, Roma doesn't drink, so I cannot raise a beer to him, but I'll hand it over to him very soberly for the latest in biz.
It does remind you of Oktoberfest, however, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, it does. It does.
Right. Moving on swiftly, here's what's coming up in business.